Welcome to the Simply Wild podcast. I'm your host, Sadie Jane, where we come back to the wild within us. Are we over this yet? Are we over this yet? I'm realizing I have a stain on my sweatshirt, which actually makes me so sad because this is one of my favorite sweatshirts. And we're on part 100. I'm going to keep going because at this point I can't stop. And also, there's so much to me. There's so much meat, but also there's so many details that I probably could leave out. This is why when I was younger, all of my family hated hearing stories from me because I was so long-winded. So it's like, guess what? I have a podcast now and I get to say whatever I want to. So we're going to keep going. And I do apologize for the trigger warning. At the beginning of the last one, I didn't realize it was going to be an hour long. I thought that I would get to my other part of the story before an hour. Hindsight, I could have kept going, but I was hungry. Your girl needed a snack, okay? So she has eaten her salad and she's ready to continue on part whatever it is. We are now integrating from the dieta. This is summer of 2020. And this is an important piece, I think, because I don't know why, I just want to share it. It's just a part of my journey. And I'm realizing as I continue to share these experiences with the medicine, and I understand, the premise of this podcast, which is Simply Wild, coming back to wild within us, and also being so mother effing wild in your own, so unhinged in your own journey of finding who you are, that nothing is out of the picture. Like when I said yes to plant medicine, it opened up doors for me that I just did not even know were possible. Like I thought that there were rules. There are rules, but I thought that there were rules to where I could find my healing. And really it was just false beliefs within myself that told me that. I am an intense person. Do I say that every time I'm on here? Yes. But because of that, it just was so freeing to know that all of these opportunities were showing up for me. And I was at a point in my life, in my career, that I could invest in that. I'm not a girly who invests in, and if this is you, I applaud you because I think it's actually so dope. I just have never been the girl who invests in designer clothes or bags or whatever. I invest in sitting in the jungle by myself, drinking medicine. I invest in my personal development. And really, you can have it all. You can invest in everything. But at that point of our lives, we had to pick what we were investing in. And it's always been investing in myself. It's always been investing in finding my own wild, coming back to my own frequency, coming back to myself. So it was a huge stretch for us to do the dieta. It was the longest I'd ever been away from my kids. And it was the best thing I could have done for myself. So that's where we're at. That's where we're at in our journey. And, just a little reminder that I don't care what people think about your journey. I don't care if people think you're crazy. I don't care if people think that, you're just doing drugs. I don't care. What I do care about, listen carefully. Because if I'm going to give you this information, there comes an accountability piece for you. So you gotta listen to me, and I need to be able to trust you is what I'm saying. All I care about is your intention. That is all I care about. Literally, with whatever you do, you go be as wild as you want, as long as your intention is pure and as long as you're not hurting anybody else. Okay. So as you come back to the wild within you, just remember your intention. Remember the purity of your intention again and again and again. Come back to that. Your intention will carry you through whatever you do, whether it's plant medicine, whether it's therapy, whether it's hypnotherapy, whether it's a yoga class, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a business. That's all that matters. Because your higher self, your God, source consciousness, yourself, the earth, the energy around you will feel that intention. And that's all you have to remember. Especially when people come at you, or if they do come at you, or if there's opposing forces, which there always will be. right? You always remember to come back to the intention. So with that being said, let's drop into the next part of my story, which is where we are going into the realm of integration. So I've just come home. I get a text from my good friend, Rachel, and she goes, we're going, this is where the trigger warning comes in, by the way, sexual assault. I'm talking about sexual assault in this. We are going, so she texts me. She texts me. I'm here. I'm coming. We're doing this. You can take that part out, Jeff. I don't mean to say I'm coming because that actually sounded really sexual and we don't need to do that. Oh shit. Sorry, I'm fixing my braid. Kinsey. Okay. So my friend Rachel texts me and says, Sadie, we're going on the Salmon River for a week and I want you to come with us. And I had just come home. I wasn't really sure. I was like, do I want to leave my kids again? And then I kept feeling like this is the perfect place to integrate, because coming back from the 5D, especially such an intense experience as that, it takes time to really recalibrate back to this frequency of Earth. And it's like the most important, well, one of the most important practices of integration is being out with nature, really helping yourself recalibrate to the earth and reground yourself. So I thought, what better way to ground myself than going and being, I wasn't ready to get on the internet again too. I was like not ready, and it felt so freeing. Like, one thing I didn't even talk about is that I feel like I really healed this addiction to social media on my phone. At this day, I was like, oh, I can survive without this. Oh, I had this clear knowing, this huge drop in, this nugget of wisdom that was like, you do not have to be addicted to your phone. That dieta was the beginning of the softening into my feminine. Okay. Huge piece. Because at that point I was so heavily in my masculine. I was so heavy into the hustle. I thought that if I was going to be successful, I had to hustle. And I a big piece of that was letting go of this idea that I had to be on my phone 24/7. And so when I got back, I was like, not ready. I'm like, I actually just want to throw my phone in the river. I don't want to get back on this. So why not just go to the river? And it was an incredible experience. The Salmon River is like a full portal, like the most gorgeous. It's like nothing I'd ever seen before. I feel really grateful that I've seen all these incredible, beautiful places all around the world, because man, the world is full of them. And also, this is another side tangent, but I'm grateful for plant medicine for healing my relationship with Mother Earth, because I've always obsessed with collecting rocks. I've always camped. I've always been an outdoorsy girl, but now I'm realizing why I was that. Well, I'm realizing that I always knew everything energy. I always knew everything was alive, but this is like, I am speaking to the grass now. I don't care how crazy that makes me sound. So I knew the Salmon River would be just the perfect place. It's really beautiful. It's this like deep canyon, and it has, these huge whitewater parts of it. And there's no really way to get in and out. Once you start floating, you have to just like keep floating. There's a speedboat that can take you back up at the end. And there's like one airstrip for like small planes. So locals can kind of come in and out. But if you're on a tour with a whitewater rafting, unless you pay a lot of money, you just like literally do the whole 4 days. And then there's places on the riverbank that are just beaches, just like white sand beaches, the craziest thing you've ever seen, that you get to just like put your tent up, and it's an incredible experience. Sorry, hang on. Okay, I just have to keep my phone on because Jeff's in surgery. So I go there, and how much of this do I want to tell? I mean, I guess if I'm telling the story, I might as well tell the story. it's super unfortunate and it is what it is. And there was this one particular man who was a little older. He had been a part of the business, this particular business, and had was known as like the dad. He was in the bishopric of his church and he was loved by everybody and he was known to just be like homies. He had his younger kids with him. And he was one of the guides. And so, of course, I'm just by myself with my girlfriends. And Rachel knew a lot of the people because she'd been going on these whitewater rafting trips for a while. And I felt safe, completely safe, and also completely open. Like, I'm looking back, I was so safe in myself and also had this lens, I think, not necessarily ignorance, just bliss, maybe. This is to do with layers of boundaries, right? That I just didn't even take into account the shielding or the safety of myself, I guess. I just felt so safe. I don't know. I just wasn't anticipating something to happen. And like the fourth night, well, maybe it was only the third night, we were all sitting around the campfire. And at this point, this particular guide, like I said, he was older. He could be my father. He had been going around the campfire and giving like people little back massages, little neck massages. And he moved over to a place right next to the fire that was like where everybody was eating. And he was like having people just like lay down and he was like sitting behind them, just like rubbing their back. And like I said, I had no inhibitions about it. Like I had no feelings. My friend had just gotten a little massage before and then it was my turn. And I was like excited because it was a lot of work. We were whitewater rafting all day. And I went and laid down and he started rubbing my shoulders and it was not a big thing. And I remember having my arms crossed underneath my chest and I just had my eyes closed and it was just not a thing. Like we were all in bikinis with our life jackets. And then at the end of the night, obviously I had my pajamas on. So I had a big t-shirt on and then all of a sudden he started rubbing lower than my shoulders. And then he started rubbing my breasts and I completely froze. And he was really aggressive. And I remember thinking, there is no way this is happening. How did I get myself in this position? No one's going to believe me if I say something. Like I completely froze. And then I remember thinking, if I move, I'm going to get in trouble. Like I'll get in trouble. Like I'm in danger. Like if I just sit here and let him finish and like just sit here and just don't move, then eventually it'll go away. And then I can just slowly walk away. Like I just remember feeling very, very unsafe. Like it just turned from 0 to 60. What's interesting about this is he waited until the sun went down because once the sun went down, I mean, we're literally in the middle of nowhere. It went pitch black, but we were right next to the fire. But people were coming over and like throwing stuff away in the trash. People were talking to me while we were getting massage. Like literally there was no window for him to do it. And then the second there was like a window, he started touching me. And it just completely took me off guard because my heart was just so open and I was just not anticipating or expecting that at all. And it really was scary. And I just remember thinking, move your arms, move your arms, move your arms, just move your arms. Like my body felt like concrete. And finally, after he had done it for what felt like forever, I finally got the bravery to like reach my arms up and I was like, oh, thanks, I'm done. And I like crossed my hands over my chest. And then he tried to do it again and I sat up and I was like, thanks, I'm done. And he's like, oh, I could do that all night. And I felt so violated and I felt so upset. And I also thought no one will believe me because he's like the nice guy of the tour. Like everybody knows he's like the dad. So I was like, and I was the girl in the bikini. And I had convinced myself to believe that somehow I had asked for it and I was just going to stay quiet. And then, he started acting weird the rest of the night, and I decided to go to bed early. And we hadn't set up our tent. We weren't setting up our tent. We were literally just like sleeping under the stars, me and my girlfriends. And I told my friend Amy, please, like, don't leave my side. And we went over, and he was like watching us. I could feel him watching us. And I was just trying to be chill because I felt like if I had made a big deal, I'd get in trouble. Like, I just felt not safe. I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to sleep through the night because I just feel like he's watching me. And we went over to where we were supposed to sleep and brush our teeth. And I was like, Amy, he like fondled me, he, like really aggressively touched me. Like, I'm not okay. And she was like, no way. She's like, I had a feeling to come over to you and I just didn't know. And it was really not great because then I finally got the balls up to wake up and tell the people in charge. And it was just really upsetting because the first thing he said was, you're not going to press charges, are you? Which it's really interesting to be in that position because I knew I was ruffling feathers by even saying anything. And I knew that everybody was going to be so disappointed because he was the good guy and everybody's disappointed in him. And they're like, why do we have to deal with this? Right. So if I was quiet, if I just kept my mouth shut, then I wouldn't hurt anybody's feelings. Like, no one has to be disappointed in anybody. But there was just something off about him. And I just thought, there's no way this is the first time this has happened. There's no way, with like everything checking out about how he is who he is and his cheekiness and camaraderie with everybody. I just had a feeling. So, it was really embarrassing and it was really upsetting. And, they met with him the next day and he confessed everything and he left. He like went down a couple different beaches to like the guy who owned the private airstrip and was friends with them or whatever. And then I had to finish off the trip because I had no way to go get out. And it was really awful. And I had made a choice while I was on the trip to press charges because I kept thinking, I'm not the only one this is happening to. And if it's happening to me, it's probably happening to the young girls, the young guides that are on here on this trip, not just on this trip or any of the trips. So I didn't even know how to call anybody. Like, how do you even go about by being like, sorry, I was like sexually assaulted. I don't even know. So I called, who did I call first? I want to say I called the Salmon River, like the county, maybe like the police office, or maybe I Googled like what to do. Somehow I found out that I needed to call the police station. And then it was confusing because they were like, well, what part of the Salmon River were you on when it happened? Because depending on what part, you're in different jurisdictions and you're in different counties. So it actually turned out that it was in a different county. So I called a different police officer or police station. And they were so wonderful. What's crazy about this, I actually have this whole thing on my Instagram about this because I ended up like posting about it. It was around the same time Elizabeth Smart came out with her whole, like the new foundation she was doing. And it felt very serendipitous. I don't think I really talked about it on social media until a couple months into the lawsuit or when I pressed charges. But I learned, it kind of made me almost like in a manic state of wanting to fix the legalities of assault all over the US because I had learned, so this was at the end of July, just literally the beginning of July, a new law had passed that included breasts in sexual assault and the definition. So up until that point in Idaho, up until that July, literally 3 weeks before this happened, touching a breast were not considered under sexual assault. They were just considered under assault for women, which is astonishing. And so because I learned that, I also learned that every state is different, right? Every state's laws are different. And so I just like had this feeling. I didn't end up going through with it because I was so busy with motherhood and everything, but I just wanted to call every state and be like, what is your law? What is your law? What is your law? I was so blown away because then I started sharing more about it. And I had all these women in my DMs saying, oh my gosh, I did this, or how did you do this, or how did you go about this? Like, nobody even knows how to report a sexual assault. And it's different for everybody's state. So as I'm talking about this, if you've ever been or have experienced this, just know that wherever you're in, whatever county you're in, you call the police station related to that county and they can assist you and they will help you understand the laws. Now, the police officers were extremely helpful. In fact, they have every county should have a volunteer person to talk to you and process with you, like almost like a therapist, but it's male or female. Usually they have one of both if they have enough volunteers. And it's people that have been through similar experiences that can just sit and talk to you about this, because it ended up getting kind of nasty. Like my experience, I was not anticipating this, which I think this happens a lot with victims. Like you think that you're being brave and you know the truth. And unfortunately, this is a lot like lawsuit energy. Like any kind of legal energy is so insane how corrupt it is, because anybody can say anything and anyone can believe them. And we're seeing this with like all these different things coming out, even this last couple of years, even the way that I don't even want to get into politics here, but even the way that our government's being run, I don't care. I'm just going to say that. I don't even care at this point. Like we all know that the president's a joke right now. I'm just going to say that. So anybody can say anything and they believe it, because when you're an accountable person who's a very truthful person, who literally is somebody who tells the truth and lives in truth, you wouldn't just expect somebody to lie under the court of law. No, that happens all the time. And I had two huge palpable experiences that I was dealing with the lawsuit, where in the legal lawsuit of my business, absolutely I never lied. There was a lot of things I could have done differently to get myself not in that lawsuit, right? But if anybody's in a legal lawsuit with their business, there's always two sides of the story as far as having some accountability somewhere, right? Or some misunderstanding. But even in that, there's still ability for people to lie. It's the most, which is duh, Sadie, of course, but it's so gross. The energy is so gross because you're literally just trying to be so truthful and people will just say anything. And then here I have this sexual assault case that I'm like, I'm going to press charges. I'm going to be brave and press charges. And I'll tell you what, it did not make me feel better. Pressing charges only made it worse. I do not regret it. But it did not help me heal at all. What it did is perpetuate the problem for me. And it also caused me a lot of angst because this guy, this asshole who had assaulted me, ran from the cops, like did all of this. It was the craziest thing. Okay, so I'm getting ahead of myself. So I pressed charges. Thank the Lord the charges were pressed outside of his county that he lived in Idaho, because of that, it actually got charged. Now, he's the kind of guy who's in a small town who's friends with the sheriff. He's friends with the sheriff. So if the assault had happened in his county, guaranteed it wouldn't have even gone through, because the sheriff in the other county had to physically track him down and had to literally say there's a rest over his head. Guess what? That did literally nothing, because the sheriff in his town was best friends with him and was literally like blocking all of these threats. This happens. Like this is the corruption that can happen. And this guy's also known in this town to be the nice guy. He's the nice guy. So nobody, and he apparently, it's so crazy. Later I found out there's a girl, I don't know how she found my Instagram, but a girl in that town DM'd me. This is that next winter. So I'm kind of jumping timelines, but the actual lawsuit, the pressing charges, was like 6 months, maybe 6 to 8 months. Obviously it was a lot longer because of the pandemic. So everything was going to be happening over Zoom, which I was so grateful that I didn't have to be in the same room. Ew, even his lawyer, I'm like, why do people defend these people? Anyway, I'm just like remembering all this because it's been so long since I talked about it. But so a girl that was in his town DM'd me and said, I know this guy's a creep. He's been talking about you, smearing your name around, saying that you asked for it and you were in a bikini and like showing people your page and how like seductive you are. You guys, literally, I had posted a picture in a bikini. Isn't it interesting that this lesson is showing up for me again? Isn't it interesting that this lesson of modesty, quote unquote, is showing up for me again? That there is another man that's come into my life to try to use that as a weapon against me. Again and again and again, a lesson to show me what my truth is and what I was going to believe, not what another man was trying to hide behind. Of course, he was trying to hide behind that. So thankfully, oh my gosh, I'm remembering all of this. I cannot even. Thankfully, it didn't affect me because I don't care what people in this tiny little town of Idaho think of me. I literally don't care. And also, I know the truth and I know what happened to me. But he had the sheriff with him. He had his buddies with him. He was getting out of all of these things. Guess what else happened? The second I came home from Salmon, the people that were on the trip with us had told his brother who owned the company, and his brother showed up at my doorstep and asked me to not press charges and said this was going to break his parents' heart, his mother's heart, and it was going to cause stress and distress in the family. And apparently this man had been struggling with stuff secretly, and we were trying to keep it under wraps. Can you believe? Can you even believe? And I looked at him and I said, thank you, but no, I'm actually not going to keep this under wraps. I'm absolutely pressing charges. You can leave now. So that happened at the beginning. And then like all of these things started, and it was really weird because, you know, when you're in this victim space and you are brave to share your story, I was naive enough to think people will believe me. Like, why do I have to, what do I gain from lying that this situation happened? Like, why would I create this drama in my life? And yet there's people that don't believe you because the other person's trying to hide their lie. This happened. And thankfully for me, mine wasn't rape, but this happens to women everywhere. And unfortunately, this is an unpopular opinion, but I'm going to say it anyway. Women also lie. People are lying all over the fucking place, right? So it was really hard on me, and I knew I had to go through with it because it was important for me to make a point that he wasn't allowed to do this anymore to any other women or girls. And I had suspicion to believe. My intuition was like, this is something that's happening. Another thing that was really interesting that was happening during this time was I'd get phone calls from Idaho. Okay, so the sheriff that I was able to connect with through this, at this tiny little town in Idaho, oh my gosh, his name was Kyle. Shout out to Kyle, the sheriff that helped me through my assault, because he was the kindest and most gentle. And I was able to call him and be like, I heard this and what's going on with this and this. And he was just there for me the whole time. And I'm so grateful for that. Because what ended up happening after his brother came is I started getting random phone calls from Idaho. So I would answer them because I thought it was maybe the sheriff's office, because Kyle had like a work phone and then he had his normal phone, and he'd have like a cellular device from the station, like different numbers that we would communicate on, and also different people like from the court system or whatever. And it was this guy calling me. So he had all my information because he worked for the company that I went with on this whitewater rafting trip. And so he had ability to call me, and he would just pick up the phone and breathe on the other line, like completely harassing me. So I started recording or like screenshotting the numbers just because I was like, is this really what's happening? Is this really what's happening? And I sent them over to Kyle and he was tracing the numbers and they were traced back to him. So we ended up being able to get a restraining order. And and it was hell. I'll never forget after it happened, my good friend, who actually I just married her, my friend Rachel, shout out to Rachel. She's one of my dearest friends. And her mother is a lot like a mother to me. I absolutely love her. She's like the most incredible witch, shaman. I've just learned so much from her. And she sat me down and it was really powerful because it was actually in that moment. So I'm jumping timelines here, but I'm coming back to after it happened. The morning after it happened, he left. He was talked to. Darla was there when he talked to, like she was there. And she sat me down on this log and she goes, Sadie, you have to be more careful with your energy. And I am so grateful for that because in that moment, I had accountability. In that moment, I chose to allow myself to remove from victimhood, which in the moment of the assault, absolutely I was a victim. Absolutely. The second after it happened, I had a choice. I either got to stay, I either could stay in victimhood, or I chose to be accountable for my energy, accountable for not allowing myself to be in those positions. And of course, situations still happen, but what happens with the energy of accountability is it literally heightens your boundaries. It literally elevates you to this state of power and magnificence where you can't be touched, or it's harder for you to be touched. So when I'm accountable and confident, that's where I can stand in that space. Now, of course, I froze. And that was a whole nother process of me unwinding. And this was actually a really beautiful part of the integration of my medicine ceremony, because as I'm learning and as I'm dipping into these medicine spaces, I'm understanding my boundaries energetically, my boundaries physically, my boundaries of who I believe I am, my boundaries of my accountability, right? And I've always thought of myself as a very open person, meaning I love everybody. I'm touching everybody. I'll kiss your cheeks. I'll hug your body. I don't know, even in my, when I was a child, I had a couple molestation experiences, and I gave myself a lot of shame when the assault happened because I felt like, well, I've been in a space where I don't want this touch. How come I wasn't, like, I'm a mom of 3 kids. I'm a successful woman. I'm strong. Like, how come I couldn't be bold enough? Obviously, it's a neurological response. Obviously, it's a trauma response, but also on an energetic, spiritual level, I realized it was my body's way. It was my body's way of telling myself, of feeling what I didn't want. And honestly, up until that point, I don't know if I ever felt like negative touch like that before, in a way where I don't actually want it. Because, and I say that, I hope I'm saying this where you guys can understand me, because I know it's a little bit of an out there thought, but growing up, you're always told to hug everybody. You're always told to be kind to everybody. You're always told you have to hug everybody. You have to let everybody in your space, be kind, move over, take up, like make yourself small so there's enough room for everybody, kind of thing. And I was never taught that you can say no to something that you don't desire. Does this make sense? Of course, I was never taught to like always say yes to sex, but that's a different. What I'm saying is, I don't think I had ever realized really how intense I felt the opposite of. Okay, so I'm going to say it this way. Learning in my dieta my boundaries, learning in my dieta what I wanted in my life, including physical energy and physical touch, I got to choose. I could still be a physical touch person and say, no, I don't actually want that. I had a feeling before he rubbed my shoulders to say no, and I didn't let him because I was trying to be nice. What this opportunity showed me is that I could still have boundaries. I could still be a good, kind person and also not have to be nice to every person who wanted to touch me. I know that's a wild concept to learn when you're 34 years old. Was I 33? This is 2020. I'm turning 35, 32. One of those ages, but maybe 30, 32. But as I've integrated and as I've understood why that happened and why it had to happen, like I was just healed, you guys. I had just gone to the jungle for a week. I was just open and excited about this new level of who I was and who I was letting into my life and my boundaries and my accountability. And then I was assaulted. And so it helped me realize as I've integrated this experience and as I've taken my accountability story and as I've tried to understand not just the physiological aspect of freezing is literally just a trauma response. So whether or not I add the spiritual downloads or integration of that, that's enough, period, that's enough. But also being able to understand, okay, this is not touch I desire. I do not want this anymore. I do not want this kind of touch. That was so profound to me as an adult woman who is trying to hold boundaries, who has always been told to be kind, that guess what? Bitch energy is powerful energy. And that is what I was stepping into with my accountability story. Another story to add to bitch energy, since we're going to go there. During my lawsuit, I think this is okay to say, there was a point when we were trying to get evidence. Against in support of me, that I wasn't like loving this partner relationship situation I was in. Partner being like business, this situation I had put myself in. And these lawyers were like, is there evidence of you telling this person that you didn't like what this person was doing? And I'm like, well, no. Because I was always just told to be nice. And these lawyers are very, very, very incredible, great lawyers. These are all older men who I had to like explain what intellectual property and digital marketing and digital courses was, right? Because that back then was still kind of new. And bless their hearts, they're like telling me, well, did you ever stand up for yourself? When I'm like, no, because you can't tell me that if I had stood up for myself, that wouldn't be used against me now too. Because if I had stood up for myself, I would just look like the bitch. But now you're telling me to be the bitch, but when you don't want me to be the bitch, you don't want me to be the bitch. So you want me to be kind when it works for me, but now it's working against me. So now I can be strong and stand up for myself? What? Like, it was so interesting how, and it's not their fault. It's not anyone's fault. Not even my fault. It's just these beautiful flags, these beautiful beacons where I get to say, is this what actually I believe? Even the definition of bitch energy. Am I just going to be nice and let people walk around? Is that the key here? I can be kind and still stand up for myself. That is what accountability is. That is what standing up for me is. That is what boundaries is. And I'm consistently getting taught these lessons. So to wrap up the assault story, after that happened, I stepped away from medicine for a while because I was just too scared to go back. I was like, I did the dieta, the assault happened. It wasn't until that spring of the next year that I decided to go to another ceremony, because I was just like, this is what is actually happening. Like, why is this happening to me? And to wrap it up, the lawsuit happened and he got charged. And it was really interesting because it was so dumb. He got a fine and I think he had to go to jail for a little bit. I don't even know. But he like asked the judge to like waive his right to hold a gun because he wanted to go hunting. I'm like, of course you did. Whatever. Anyway, so he's upset because he couldn't go hunting for a year, but don't touch people's boobs that don't want to be touched and you won't have that problem. So the other part to this story is Jeff, right? So I get home from this trip and I'm like, I get back into service and I'm like, I have something to tell you. Like something happened to me. And I was so, probably more than anything, probably the thing that I was most frustrated about was how much it affected Jeff and I. I was really pissed because I had this newfound reclamation of saving our marriage, of putting 110% into Jeff and I. And now I like am flinching when he's coming towards me, or like I lay down and he stands over me and I'm feeling, because one thing I don't know if I mentioned or specified was because I was laying down, when he started touching my breast, this man, he like stood over me and used a lot of force. And so I didn't realize how much it affected me until I got home and Jeff and I were cuddling and he started touching my chest and I like started flinching and freezing up and I was like, you don't get to go there. Like you don't get to touch it. And of course it affected Jeff and me and I was pissed. I was pissed that it had that effect on me. So up at that point, we were seeing a couples therapist together. And then I started seeing a sex therapist to help me process and move through it. And Jeff tried to be as understanding as he could without really understanding, what I was even processing or going through. It was hard for him to understand why his body would trigger a response to me, right? But, in the trauma-informed space, which I am as far as everything that I offer, it has nothing to do with the person. It's just the energy. It's just the physicality. It's just the physical person being by you, which is something that is so important to understand if you're holding space, to have empathy for. So it actually separated and put a wedge more between us because I was sensitive and I was also upset that he didn't understand. And I think that comes from victim energy a little bit. Little did I know, right? So we had an opportunity again to, the kids at that point were still kind of in between school being online and school not being online. And so we had an opportunity to go and live in Kauai for the winter again on my parents' ranch. And Jeff was still working for his job at that point. And we both had said that we were going to give 100% and it just wasn't working. Like there was just disconnect after disconnect and it just wasn't working out. And honestly, at that point, it just kept feeling like it was my fault. I was always the one that was like the problem. I felt like always the problem. And I was trying so hard to be accountable for the problem. Little did I know now that it was because we weren't both being accountable. It wasn't working because I was showing up accountable and he was showing up as like, you're the one that's broken. You're the one that's got to fix it. No fault to him. This is just facts. So when I went to Kauai without him, we just decided to have an emotional separation and I would take care of the kids and enjoy my time over there and he would just be alone. And really this was the first time he had ever been alone ever since we'd been married. And up until then he had, gone on a mission and lived with his parents. Like he had never really been alone. And I think at this point he had sat with grandmother. He went and sat with her, which was massive because Jeff had never had one sip of alcohol, not any kind of like nothing, but he was very curious because he saw the changes in me. And I'll let him share that story if he wants to, or if he comes on here. But That time was so profound for us because Jeff got to be alone with himself and really understand his part in what was going on with us. And genuinely, that is the only reason why our marriage worked. That is the only reason why our marriage survived, because both of us showed up humbly and said, this is my choice. I am choosing this, 1, and 2, this is where I fucked up. This is my accountability story. And the only way it worked was with both of us coming super accountable into that. And also saying, because I'm accountable with this, because this is where I'm choosing to say, this was my part in the story, this is also where I'm going to change. This is also where I'm going to grow. This is also where I have an opportunity for expansion. And it changed everything. It changed everything. And he came to Christmas, and, you know, one thing that was really interesting about him taking accountability was, I don't know what it's like to have a father who is like a paternal, a blood father raising your kids. Because my father left when I was 3, and then my other father married my mom, right? Remember, when I was 7. And there's a different dynamic when it's not your biological father. And so I didn't know what that dynamic was. And Jeff was always a great father, as much as he could have been. But I think that because I didn't understand the logistics of fatherhood to the point where I'm like, have a good example of what it's like to have a biological father around. Like, there's just little nuances when you have a stepfather. Like, he would never walk around in his underwear, of course, right? There's just like nuances. There's boundaries. The door was always closed. Like, there was more privacy. And so those parts, Jeff always checked off the box, but there were other things where I felt like I didn't realize at the time, but now I'm realizing that there was some disconnect. Like, he was always working his very busy job, but he'd go, to the gym before, and then he wouldn't help me with bedtime or breakfast or like really play with the kids. And it wasn't anything necessarily bad. He was an incredible father as far as checking off the boxes, but there was like almost, the saying, you can't meet anybody. You can only meet people as far as you've met yourself. I very much feel like that's what Jeff and I were doing our first handful of years of marriage, even in parenthood, because we just were doing the best we could. But there was always a block there of like going deep with our kids or being really intimate with our kids. And I was always that way, but he almost had like a block of intimacy. I'm super curious actually to talk to him about this when he comes on the podcast, because I think that he'll have some really powerful insight, because he's always been so good, but there's always also this, I don't know, maybe it's like the term that he was kind of asleep. I didn't realize this was the case, okay? And there's a reason why I'm telling you all this, I promise, until he came to Christmas for Kauai, and all of a sudden, I have chills all over my body. I wrote down actually in my notes, I wonder if I can find it, all of the different changes I saw in him. When he chose to sit in the frequency of accountability, something shifted in him. And all of a sudden, he was kneeling down to the kids and holding their faces and asking them questions. I swear on my life, we haven't gotten to this part of like my gifts, but I just saw like an angel right here. That was crazy on the screen. Okay, side note. So all of a sudden, he was just more present. He was just more there. He tried harder. And when you choose to say, accountability, by the way, is literally just saying, where can I be better? Where am I missing out on? What can I change? What can I evolve? How can I better myself? What pieces need to be fixed, right? And he did that. And it was incredible to witness. Incredible to witness. And you don't know what you don't know. And so to see him be really helpful and really present changed everything. And it was probably the first time really ever, that I believed that I could make the marriage work. Because at that point, you know, when the lawsuit happened, I was pretty much checked out. I was like, okay, if I can make enough money on my own, I can make it. And also I had this false belief in my mind where I was just going to stick it out because I didn't want my kids to have two homes. I didn't want them to be raised in a broken home, which ultimately I was just trauma bonding to my own experience, because I actually don't believe that. I think that it can be healthy if the parents focus on their health and well-being. It can be a very healthy experience, I believe. So we both showed up in accountability, and we both chose each other, and it changed everything. And then I asked him we did family pictures in Kauai, and I surprised him and set everything up where we renewed our vows. And I had a ring that I got from this cute crystal shop in Kauai, and I had our friends that were there, Mike and Natalie, help us prepare, and they officiated the ring ceremony. And I got down on one knee during family pictures and asked him if, he would renew his vows with me, and we chose each other. And it was the most powerful, beautiful reclamation. And at that point in our marriage, we were still very different in our beliefs, very different. And yet there was something that was different. There was a sense of respect, and there was a sense of accountability, and there was a sense of honoring. And it changed everything. And I learned a lot of lessons. 2020 was my year to learn about boundaries. And I will never forget those lessons. And I will never put myself in those situations again, because I learned what it was like to be tested in the terms of my own femininity, in my own power as a woman, in my own magic, in my own balance of the masculine and the feminine. And after that was when I got my fern tattoo on my shoulder over my masculine side to heal itself. Ferns are so powerful. First of all, they're ancient. They've been here before the dinosaurs, right? They're just this ancient medicine, ancient wise elder. And they only grow in places where there's adversity, right? Where there's storms, or on the sides of volcanoes. And I've always played with ferns. I played in ferns when I was living in Oregon, when my mom was separated or divorced. And they've always been my companion. The property in Kauai has just hundreds of ferns, and I play with them, and they helped me through the separation, and they helped me through my own reclamation of who I am. And they're powerful and gentle and beautiful. And when I tattooed the fern on my shoulder, on my masculine side, that was the closing of the ceremony of 2019 to the spring of 2021, essentially, where I learned that I can soften, where I learned that softening into my feminine, really reclaiming the essence of who I am and who I was and who I was becoming, was equally important as holding boundaries, was equally important as understanding that I wasn't allowing another man into my business. I was not going to allow another man or into my life who I didn't first accept and feel and need. And nor did I need another man to come into my life, nor did I need another man in my business. And it helped me really bring the idea of the feminine and the masculine together. And that only just opened the next part of my spiritual journey. which was when I removed my IUD, and I'll go there next. My next couple ceremonies where I reclaimed my feminine energy. I have chills all over again. That was another reason, another thing that was really powerful about the assault. Of course, actually, I think this is controversial to say, but I wouldn't take anything back. I was going to say, of course, I would take an assault back, but everything has had its purpose. I was so nervous about coming back to the medicine after that happened because I just wasn't sure what she would show me that I needed to heal. I was scared to go back. I was scared to heal that piece because it was so traumatic, and it also brought up a lot of trauma from my childhood. And yet only just saying yes to meeting medicine again just propelled me on this path of sexual awakening that was so powerful for me. I don't know if it would have happened. Of course it wouldn't have happened the way that it did if the assault hadn't happened. I know eventually it would have happened. It would have found a different way to happen. Okay. So let's say that I absolutely, if I could take back the assault and learn the lessons I had learned about my feminine awakening, about the balance of the masculine and the feminine within me, if I had understood that, if I had thought that there was another way, then of course I would be open to it. But here we are. There is no erasing the past or fixing or changing it. So what are we going to do with it? We're going to learn the lessons from it. We're going to take accountability. The best thing I could have done after the assault was soften, was not close my heart, was trust. And 2020 was the year of softening for me. It was a forced softening for sure through all the lessons that I had to deal with. And actually in the spring of 2021, the lawsuit with my business was wrapped up as well. And it was the hardest 18 months of my life. Truly. With a combination of everything, friendship loss, love loss, business loss, moral loss, relationship loss, marriage loss, friendship, physical loss, right? But it all had a piece because up until that point, I was so hard. I was so intense. I was so harsh because I felt like I had to be. I had to have this shield, this armor, this that I didn't even really believe in, because the second the armor was cracked, the second the armor was punctured, it crumbled. Yeah, I'm a tough woman. Yeah, I can do it. Oh, but I'm going to let a man come into my business. And the second I don't like what he's doing, what am I going to say? You're doing a great job. You're doing a great job. You can do everything. Oh yeah, I love it. Thank you so much. Right? Of course there's gratitude for him. My business wouldn't be what it is without him. But also there was a lot of overstepping and boundaries that I didn't have because of me. So the more my masculine tried so hard to compensate, the less I actually trusted in me, in my femininity, in my magic, in my flow, in my essence, in my sensuality. And the whole reason why we're here, and the whole reason, not even for 1 second did I trust my womb, my actual portal of creation that was trying so hard to create amongst this. My body worked so hard. I didn't make it easy for it. That's for damn sure. Amongst this facade of power and empowerment, and all of that projected and catapulted me into this softening, to where truly the softening that I have experienced, that I'll share in the next podcast, is how I am, who I am now, is how I am in my business, is how I am in life, is how I have transitioned from healing through suffering to now healing through pleasure, and healing through the romanticizing of my life, and healing through the softening into the magic of the feminine within me. I love you. I hope you do something wild for yourself today. I will catch you next time.